Life had always been predictable. As a mother, my days revolved around routines, waking up early, preparing breakfast, ensuring my son, Alex, had everything he needed before he left for school. My husband, Mark, was a constant presence, steady and reliable, though our conversations had grown quieter over the years. We were a family, bound by love and habit, but somewhere along the way, the spark of excitement had faded into the background. Alex was my pride and joy. At 19, he was no longer the little boy who clung to my hand, but a young man with his own thoughts, dreams, and secrets. He had always been close to me, confiding in me about his struggles and triumphs, but lately something felt different. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the first faint breeze before a storm. One evening, as I was clearing the dinner table, Alex lingered in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant, "do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't married Dad?" The question caught me off guard. I paused, a dish in my hand, and turned to look at him. His eyes were earnest, searching for something I couldn't quite name. "Why do you ask?" I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged, looking away. "I don't know. I guess I just wonder about you sometimes. You know, who you were before all this. Before me." His words stirred something deep within me. It had been years since anyone had asked me about me, not as a mother or a wife, but as a person. Mark and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, but our conversations rarely ventured beyond the mundane. Alex's curiosity felt like a breath of fresh air, though I couldn't shake the faint unease that accompanied it. Over the next few weeks, Alex's questions became more frequent. He wanted to know about my childhood, my dreams, the choices I had made. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, as if every word I spoke held some hidden meaning. At first, I thought it was just a phase, a young man trying to understand the world through the lens of his parents' experiences. But as the days passed, I began to notice the way he looked at me, not with the casual affection of a son, but with a kind of intensity that made my heart skip a beat. One Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves alone in the house. Mark was out running errands, and the quiet between us felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite define. Alex sat across from me on the couch, his knee brushing against mine as he leaned forward. "Mom," he said softly, "do you ever feel like there's more to life than this? Than just being someone's wife or mother?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment I couldn't speak. His words echoed the thoughts I had buried deep within myself, the quiet longing for something I couldn't name. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this life, it's what I chose. It's what I wanted." He nodded, but his expression was unreadable. "I just think you deserve more," he said finally. "You're amazing, Mom. You don't even realize it." His words left me breathless. There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at me, that made my chest tighten. I told myself it was nothing, just a son's admiration for his mother, but deep down I knew it was more than that. And the worst part was, a small, forbidden part of me liked it. That night, as I lay in bed beside Mark, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Alex's curiosity had awakened something in me, something I had long ignored. I didn't know where it would lead, but I couldn't deny the pull I felt, toward him, toward the possibility of being seen in a way I hadn't been in years. The seeds had been planted, and though I didn't know it yet, they were already beginning to grow. The days that followed were a strange mix of comfort and unease. Alex's presence in the house felt more pronounced, as if the air itself had shifted to accommodate his growing curiosity about me. He sought me out more often, finding excuses to be near me, helping me in the kitchen, joining me on the porch for evening tea, or simply sitting quietly in the same room while I read or worked. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, a young man seeking connection with his mother. But the way he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, made it impossible to ignore the undercurrent of something deeper. One afternoon, as we sat together in the living room, Alex turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," he said, Do you ever feel like you're stuck? Like there's this whole other version of you that no one gets to see? His words struck a chord. I had spent so many years being a mother, a wife, that I had almost forgotten the woman I once was, the one who had dreams and passions of her own. Sometimes, I admitted, setting my book aside. But that's just part of life, isn't it? We make choices, and sometimes those choices mean letting go of certain things. He frowned, his brow furrowing in a way that reminded me of when he was a child, trying to solve a difficult puzzle. But what if you didn't have to let go? He asked. What if you could have both? The life you have now and the life you always wanted. I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. It's not that simple, Alex. Life doesn't work that way. He didn't respond, but his gaze lingered on me, intense and searching. For a moment, I felt as though he could see straight through me, past the walls I had built around myself. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the weeks went by, the boundaries between us began to blur. Alex's touches became more frequent, a hand on my shoulder as he passed by, a brush of his fingers against mine when he handed me a cup of coffee. Each contact sent a jolt through me, a reminder of the connection we were both trying to navigate. I told myself it was innocent, that it was just his way of showing affection, but the way my heart raced whenever he was near told a different story. One evening after dinner, Alex and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. Mark had gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day at work, and the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Alex stood beside me at the sink, drying the dishes as I washed them. Our shoulders brushed, and I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the hot water. "Mom," he said suddenly, his voice low and tentative, "do you ever think about what it would be like to start over? To just leave everything behind and be someone else?" I froze, my hands stilling in the soapy water. "Why would you ask that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He set the dish towel down and turned to face me, his expression earnest. "Because I see how hard you work, how much you give to everyone else. And I want you to be happy. Really happy." His words were like a knife to my heart, cutting through the layers of denial I had wrapped around myself. I wanted to tell him that I was happy, that I had everything I needed, but the lie caught in my throat. Instead, I looked away, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I don't know what you want me to say," I said finally, my voice trembling. He reached out, his hand gently tilting my chin so that I was forced to meet his gaze. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "I just want you to know that I see you. All of you." In that moment, something inside me broke. The walls I had built around my heart crumbled, and I felt a flood of emotions I had long suppressed. I wanted to pull away, to retreat into the safety of my role as his mother, but I couldn't. His touch, his words, had awakened something in me, a longing I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. But even as I stood there, caught in the intensity of his gaze, a part of me screamed that this was wrong. He was my son, and no matter how much I craved the connection we were building, I knew it couldn't go any further. The problem was, I wasn't sure I had the strength to stop it. The days grew warmer, and with them, the tension between Alex and me seemed to intensify. It was as if the changing season had brought with it a shift in the air, a heaviness that made it difficult to breathe whenever we were alone together. I tried to convince myself that nothing was wrong, that the bond we were forming was natural, but the way my heart raced whenever he was near told a different story. One Saturday morning, Mark left early to go fishing with a friend, leaving Alex and me alone in the house. I busied myself with chores, hoping to distract myself from the thoughts that had been plaguing me. But Alex had other plans. He found me in the garden, kneeling in the dirt as I pulled weeds from the flower beds. "Need some help?" he asked, crouching down beside me. I glanced at him, surprised by his offer. "Since when do you volunteer for yard work?" Teased, trying to keep my tone light. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made my stomach flutter. "Since I realized how much you do around here," he said. "You're always taking care of everyone else. Let me take care of you for once." His words were like a balm to my soul, soothing the parts of me that had felt neglected for so long. But they also stirred something deeper, something I wasn't ready to confront. I nodded, unable to trust my voice, and together we worked in silence, the sun warming our backs as we tended to the garden. As the morning wore on, the silence between us grew heavier, filled with unspoken words and lingering glances. I could feel Alex's eyes on me, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Finally, he broke the silence. "Mom," he said, his voice soft but firm, "do you ever think about what it would be like to just let go? To stop worrying about what everyone else thinks and just do what makes you happy?" I froze, my hands stilling in the dirt. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling, "you don't understand. It's not that simple." "Why not?" he pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. You deserve to feel alive." His words were like a mirror, reflecting the desires I had buried deep within myself. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was content with my life, but the lie caught in my throat. Instead, I looked away, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I don't know what you want from me," I whispered, my voice breaking. He reached out, his hand brushing against mine, sending a jolt through me. "I just want you to be happy," he said softly. "And if that means letting go of the past, of the roles you've been stuck in, then I want to help you do that." His touch was electric, and for a moment I allowed myself to lean into it, to feel the warmth of his hand against mine. But then reality came crashing down, and I pulled away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Alex, this isn't right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're my son. We can't do this." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and frustration. "Why not?" he asked. "Why does it have to be wrong? Why can't we just be honest about how we feel?" His words left me breathless, and for a moment I couldn't speak. The part of me that had been yearning for connection, for understanding, wanted to give in, to let go of the guilt and the fear and just be with him. But the rational part of me, the part that knew the consequences of what we were contemplating, screamed for me to stop. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice trembling. I need time to think." He nodded, though the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. "Okay," he said softly. "But just know that I'm here, Mom. No matter what." As he stood and walked back to the house, I remained in the garden, my hands trembling as I tried to process everything that had just happened. The weight of his words, of his touch, lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the line we were dangerously close to crossing. I didn't know what to do. The part of me that craved connection, that longed to feel alive again, was at war with the part of me that knew this was wrong. And as I sat there, surrounded by the beauty of the garden, I couldn't help but wonder if I had the strength to resist the pull of what Alex was offering. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I tried to distance myself from Alex, to retreat into the safety of my role as his mother, but it was impossible. His presence was everywhere, a constant reminder of the connection we had forged and the line we had almost crossed. Every glance, every word felt charged with meaning, and I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about myself, about him, about us. Mark noticed the change in me. He would look at me with concern, asking if I was okay, if something was wrong. I would smile and tell him I was fine, but the lie felt heavy on my tongue. How could I explain to him what I didn't even understand myself? How could I tell him that his son, our son, had awakened something in me that I had long suppressed? One evening after dinner, Alex and I found ourselves alone on the porch. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. It was a perfect moment, serene and beautiful, but the tension between us was palpable. "Mom," Alex said, breaking the silence, "we need to talk." I felt my heart skip a beat, but I nodded, unable to trust my voice. He turned to me, his expression serious but gentle. "I know this is hard for you," he said. "I know you're scared, and I understand why. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend that I don't feel this. This connection between us. It's real, Mom. And I think you feel it too. His words were like a knife to my heart, cutting through the layers of denial I had wrapped around myself. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that what we were feeling was just a phase, a mistake, but the lie caught in my throat. Instead, I looked away, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. Alex, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't right. You're my son. We can't do this. Why not? He asked, his tone pleading. Why does it have to be wrong? Why can't we just be honest about how we feel? I shook my head, the tears finally spilling over. Because it's not that simple, I said. There are rules, boundaries. We can't just ignore them. He reached out, his hand gently brushing against mine, sending a jolt through me. Maybe the rules are wrong, he said softly. Maybe we're the ones who get to decide what's right for us. His touch was electric, and for a moment I allowed myself to lean into it, to feel the warmth of his hand against mine. But then reality came crashing down, and I pulled away, my heart pounding in my chest. I can't, I whispered, my voice breaking. I can't. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and frustration. I understand, he said finally. But just know that I'm here, Mom. No matter what. As he stood and walked back into the house, I remained on the porch, the weight of his words, of his touch, lingering in the air. The sun had set, and the world was bathed in twilight, the line between day and night blurred, just like the boundaries between us. I didn't know what to do. The part of me that craved connection, that longed to feel alive again, was at war with the part of me that knew this was wrong. And as I sat there, surrounded by the beauty of the evening, I couldn't help but wonder if I had the strength to resist the pull of what Alex was offering. In the end, I knew I had to make a choice. But as I looked out at the darkening sky, I realized that the choice wasn't between Alex and Mark. It was between the woman I had become and the woman I had always wanted to be. And I didn't know which one I would choose.